My position is kind of trifold. My position is that
Okay.
the women have rights, the unborn do not. Therefore, the women have no obligation to sacrifice. Their government doesn't have any role in the practice of abortion.
Okay. So what you're saying, in other words, is the life of the child, the human rights doesn't exist with children.
It doesn't exist in reference to the unborn.
Okay. Okay. But what if the children that are being aborted are of value? Each life is of value. But what if this child is somebody who can make a change in the world? Wouldn't you want to save their life?
I mean, what type of change? You're talking about somebody who wants to, start up a nationalistic regime? Or are you talking about a
No, I
change in
didn't say
reference
that.
to someone?
Okay. So
Well,
what change do you
firstly,
think is important?
I apologize that you're interrupting right now, but I mean, I didn't say you said anything. This is the whole purpose of asking questions. You said change, so I'm giving you two alleys right now. You could have change in reference to somebody who wants to start up a nationalistic regime in the United States and kind of be similar to what 1940 Germany was like. Or you could have a civil rights leader, or you could have somebody who wins a Nobel Peace Prize. So there's so many different ways in which people can be a change in society, but I don't understand why that's relevant here.
Because, okay, so do you think that Black Lives Matter and everybody's lives matter?
Oh, yeah, every life matters.
Okay,
And
but just not the child. How do you make the difference between the living? I mean, why would you think that the children don't have value like a human being has value?
value to who?
Well, I'm sorry.
Well, let me take a step back before I ask that question.
Sure, go ahead.
Um, Black Lives Matter is, I think, although it says Black Lives Matter and every lives matter and whatever, you can't forget the context that Black Lives Matter is primarily under a political and social context. And so when they mean Black Lives Matter, they don't mean Black Lives Matter in a vacuum. They mean Black Lives Matter. Therefore, there should be political and social action to treat them as if they matter. So that's what Black Lives Matter means. It doesn't mean they matter in a vacuum. That's not what they're saying. Secondly, I'm not concerned here with the unborn having value. I don't think that's relevant. I think the concept that should be only be relevant in reference to the unborn is whether or not they have rights. Because a random homeless guy can come up to a pregnant woman's belly and say, "I value this thing inside of it," but that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean anything to the government, whether or not it should be legal or not.
Okay, so what would you think if there's a random 100 babies in women's uteruses, and 10 of those babies have value to society? Would you still terminate their lives?
when it when the woman is pregnant with the unborn, why should the woman be concerned with whether or not other people value it? Shouldn't it just be up to her because she's the one enduring pregnancy? Why should she consider
Okay,
the opinions of other people?
but if you were the father of a child that had value, like they found a cure or they changed something in society that made a great difference, whatever that is, why would you want to terminate your baby?
Wait, what do you mean it has value? Value from whom? Like who is valuing it?
Well, from society, just like you're a member of
Society.
society
Who
and
is
you have
society?
value, because there has to be rules and regulations and a moral conduct, right? And that once you're here, that you have value as a human being.
Who is
I mean, we
society?
just don't eliminate you just because you don't have any value, like you're not contributing. Why would we do that to a child?
Well, firstly, again, it's important to understand why the concept of value isn't relevant in this conversation. Because value is going to be dependent on the evaluator. So, there's a bunch of problems and stipulations when it comes to arguing with value. Um, One, you do have to take in full context that this conversation is primarily talking about politics because we're talking about the illegalization or the legalization of abortion. And so if we're going to make this conversation about a value, what you're essentially saying is that the government is going to dictate the evaluation, is going to dictate how human beings should interact with one another based on whether or not the government values you. So you're essentially saying that the government can point at people.
No. See, I think here's what happened. I don't think it's the government has.
After I'm done, but this is precisely the issue with value. The concept of value is dependent on the evaluator.
No.
If that's,
I look at it from a different viewpoint. It's the women has decided that their babies.
Let me finish my point.
Keep talking.
A good example of this is I personally didn't like my aunt. So I would say that my aunt doesn't have a value within my life. So yes, the evaluator is saying essentially my aunt didn't have a value. But that doesn't absolve my aunt of rights. So this means that the concept of value and individual rights are two separate concepts. And therefore you can have rights and you can't be killed because you have rights, but also at the same time don't have value to another person. So again, I think it's irrelevant to this conversation.
So if somebody can come along and determine that you're not a value and they can eliminate you right away, that's okay?
I that's fine, but I have rights. That's the issue. So you're kind of proving my point a little bit.
No, okay, but it's about having a moral conduct. And the reason I believe that the government has entered into this because there are too many abortions. I think that's part of the reason, is maybe that they think it's not the right thing to do, but the other hand is, and something that I don't think a lot of people take a look at, is that abortions, wherever they come in the United States, it's really a part of a plan by a much higher level than the government. And a plan, just like other things have been, it's a plan to eliminate a lot of human beings. So I'm just surprised that a group of people who believe in abortion has bought into that, and that there is no value in life, and it's all about an individual's right as opposed to life of an unborn child. I just find that really interesting.
That's cool. Yeah. So again, I think you're still proving my point that we're coming at this from two different contexts. Because you kind of said it yourself, you're talking about the moral conduct of society and governance, and that's precisely the issue. The concept of moral worth, value, and moral conduct, for the time being, would be adjacent to the conversation that actually needs to be had. Again, when we're talking about being pro-life, pro-choice, pro-abortion, or whatever, we're talking about the legal standing of abortion, and thus we must discuss what is going to be the key factor or the key principle that the government is going to be utilizing in order to determine whether or not abortion should be legal or illegal. And so this is why moral conduct and value would be irrelevant to the conversation for the time being, because there are plenty instances in which I can do in a moral act, but that would not automatically guarantee me going to jail. Like lying to my mother. Like I wouldn't go to jail for lying to my mother, although we could probably both agree that's a moral act, an immoral act. But that's precisely proving my point, that even if you're so correct in justifying the position that abortion is immoral, this doesn't automatically translate that abortion should be illegal. And this is precisely why we need to have the conversation on whether or not the unborn has rights. Because the framework that the government's going to be utilizing in order to determine social relationships amongst human beings is going to be the concept of individual rights. It's going to be the question, did this person violate the rights of this person? Yes or no? And if they did not violate the rights of someone else, then there is no grounds or no reasoning for why this person should go to jail or this activity should be banned. It's that simple.
Got you. Well, as far as morals, it's not up to the government, because the government doesn't force women to take an abortion. Women make that their own choice. So that clearly says that decision is on the woman and not the government. Otherwise, it would be a whole totally different set of circumstances, and that's not true. Government is not involved with abortion at all. It's the women. There are millions and millions of abortions every year in the United States because women have made the decision that for one reason or the other, they don't want to have the baby. So that is a definite moral compass issue. It has nothing to do with anything else but the fact that they don't want to be responsible for the child. And it's unfortunate. I mean, that there's a society now of young people your age and people, of course, my age too, of all ages, that don't value human life, and this is probably why that we're having so many problems in the United States, because people don't look at human beings anymore. Their fellow have the same set of manners and the same set of belief systems. It's all across the board, and it's not a united country, and it's not a country that cares about one another, and that's really where it is, and it's really a pitiful situation.
I'm generally in agreement with that. The reason being is because the government has infiltrated many aspects of the economic and social atmosphere. And so when the government infiltrates many aspects of the social and economic sphere, and we have a system in which people could actually vote on what type of philosophies to implement in those social and economic atmospheres, and we have a vast majority of people with differing political and social and philosophic worldviews, this is what's going to cause a major split. So a great example of this is the schooling system, as in Florida right now is actually being very split because we have people, well, Florida is a swing state, so, but oftentimes it is very conservative, in which Florida may be in agreement with, kind of reinstating the Pledge of Allegiance, or, reinstating times in which kids could be go to prayer. Also, there's also very liberal people in Florida as well, where they might want to try to keep DEI courses, keep critical race theory, keep African American studies, and so on and so forth. And so you have this split of people who are continuously trying to vote for the Florida government to try to be one way or another. And this is why we have such vast splits amongst ourselves, is because the government is actually taking improper procedures and infiltrating itself in many aspects of the society.
I don't disagree with you. I agree with you on that 100%. That's why there's so many issues. 25 years ago, we didn't have the same thing. And I just think that's the precise reason why that we have all the problems. This government has been in our business too long. That I do agree with you, but abortion, no, I don't. But thank you so much for being so polite and respectful. I really appreciate that. You did a great job, and I'll give somebody else a chance to speak. So you have a wonderful day.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Oh, how do I get out?
I got you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. See, I'm actually raised in the South where we say yes, ma'am. I don't know. People throw me off when I be saying yes, ma'am to a lot of people. And people be like, bro, I'm literally your age. It'd be weird because, especially in a university, people would be serving me food, and I'd be like, thank you, sir. Or, yes, ma'am. And it'd be like, bro, I'm literally your age. I'll be like, bro, I just kind of grew up like this, bro. As long as you're some atheist, what's up? As long as you're in a position of some type of relative, I wouldn't say power because it's a mutual transaction, but as long as you're in a position in which I'm receiving something from you and you didn't really have to do that, it's always like a yes ma'am thing. So it's kind of weird. It'd be weird. I'm gonna be saying that to I'll be 50, 18-year-old cash register. Yes ma'am. They're gonna be in that bit. What? All right, cool.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So do you believe in human rights?
I think human rights is a redundancy. I think rights only are applicable to humans.
Okay, so then you don't believe that a fetus is human?
If you want to really get technical, I personally make a distinction between human and human being. Human being referring to post-birth.
So you're saying so would it be okay then to abort a baby at when she's in labor or about to be in labor?
Yeah, that's legal. That should be legal.
So you're saying that that baby doesn't actually become human until it leaves the birth canal?
I'm saying it doesn't have rights until it leaves the birth canal.
Why?
Because I would say the concept of individual rights are only applicable when you become individuated from another person, and that situation only occurs at birth.
So you have to be an individual.
Correct.
Okay, so then what about what do you call it?
The joint twins?
Yes.
What about them?
Well, they're not. I wouldn't say that they're individual because their life relies on each other in a lot of situations.
Are you familiar with the concept of joint property?
Like in what way?
Like joint property,
Like so you're saying that they each are individual people, but they own their own body. Is that what you're saying? Together?
yeah, they don't own. I think it's improper to say that conjoined twins rely on each other, because that assumes the position that like a conjoined twin like owns something within that body. And so I disagree with that position. I think it's similar to joint property, where there is no, like, the way the joint property works, it doesn't work where like the house is split, where like if I had a twin brother, the brother would own the left side of the house and I would own the right side of the house. No, we would both own the entire house together. And that's what like conjoined twins are. So it's not just two individuals then mushed together. No, they were born mushed together. So that's their body collectively. And so this is why when they are born as conjoined twins, the relationship is not, the problem is not between themselves. The problem is between them and the mother. And so when they're born, they would have rights too.
So as soon as so you're saying that they become a human as soon as they're separated from, they don't have to rely on the mother anymore.
I would say they are of the human species. But if we're going to be talking about human in a very social and political concept, especially in the context of law, of recognizing persons and human beings, they would not be a legally recognizable entity until the moment of birth.
Yeah, but I would say legality has nothing to do with human rights. I think if we're talking about what the definition of like what the definition of a human is and whether they have human rights or not, I would say what the U.S. government laws are is irrelevant in that situation. I think it's more of a philosophical thing.
I'm in 100% agreement. The laws does not precede the necessary philosophical context. The laws are to recognize, well, I'll put it this way. This is how I usually formulate it. The concept of individual rights is the political and philosophic principle. And the laws are supposed to recognize it. So that means that the laws actually occur afterward. And so when I say the legal context, I'm not saying that the law is dictating who has rights and who doesn't, right? That's up to political philosophy, and the law is supposed to recognize the political principles that we're talking about now. So I'm in agreement. Hello? Okay. Is bro holding a cane? Yes. Okay, I wish that person was coming back. I ain't gonna lie. She was coming with some heat. I was expecting to just have a normal chill conversation. She came in with some heat though. Not gonna lie, cause I had to change up the way I was speaking, cause I was like, well, if you really want to be technical, I had to change up a little bit of the way I was speaking. No cap. She came in with some heat. I'll give her that. She came in with some heat. So philosophical beliefs don't always need to be laws. Correct. But like if we're talking about political and philosophic principles, in a sense, yeah, they kind of do ish. And I don't know. It's a very weird answer. That's a very weird question to answer.
No, I got disconnected. I'm sorry.
That's what's up. Come on, continue bringing that heat, man.
So I guess all I was saying was, so in the situation of a premature baby who still has to be connected to a ventilator and like a machine to stay alive, do they have rights in that situation?
How did they get to the ventilator?
Like if you had to have a C-section prematurely.
Mm-hmm. And what is the process of a C-section?
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but if I had, from my limited understanding, it's where you cut open the abdomen of the mother and disconnect the umbilical cord from the mother. So, yeah.
That's what's up. Now, the reason why I asked that is because, again, under the framework that we're talking about relationship amongst human beings. We're not talking about relationships amongst a human being and a machine. So the ventilator would be irrelevant. Under the example that you gave me, like you already established that the newborn is now separated from the woman, which is the only criteria that is necessary in my worldview for it to have rights. So being connected to the ventilator wouldn't matter.
So then they would have rights in this situation.
Yeah, they would be separated from the woman.
Okay, so now I just want to get this clear. So you have a baby who's a month premature in one room connected to a ventilator that has rights, and then you have a 9-month-old neonate that's about to be, sorry, not neonate, but you know what I mean, like they're about to be born in the next room, but the one that is connected to the ventilator now has human rights, and the one that is still within the mother does not, even though the one in the mother is older and more developed.
Yeah, correct.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand where that worldview comes from. Like, why is the rights of the baby contingent on its relation to the mother?
You kind of answered the question a little bit, because the concept of rights isn't a thing. It's not an object. It's not something written on my forehead. The concepts of rights actually come into fruition, dictating the proper relation. It's supposed to outline the proper relationship amongst human beings. And so, what it's supposed to outline is that it is true that each human being must engage in their own independent action in order to pursue their own lives. And the concept of rights is supposed to say, hey, this is a fact that we must engage in our own independent actions to, continue our lives and so on and so forth. And the concept of rights is to ban the fact that I can't initiate force against you. I can't punch you. I can't steal from you, so on and so forth. So that's what the whole concept of rights is. It's a guidance, the principle of relationships. And so when we're talking about rights, it's not something that's born into you, intrinsic. There's no thing called rights. I can stab you open and grab it. So that's why the idea that rights are inherent at the moment of conception is a bit flawed. It's more so relational. So when the newborn is finally born, and now it's its own independent biological unit in which it could operate for itself independent of the woman. And by that, I do not mean successfully. I do not mean efficiently. Obviously, it needs the woman for breastfeeding or milk and buying and stuff. I mean the fact that it can still operate independent of the woman. That's when the concept of individual rights are now applicable to the newborn. It's essentially saying, hey, the unborn is now utilizing its own esophagus, it's now using its own lungs, or it's breathing through its own nostrils, and so on and so forth. These are examples in which it's using its own independent biological components to function for itself, independent of another person. And so this is why when you're born, you have individual rights.
Okay, I understand that. So you're saying that rights is, yeah, obviously it's not a physical, tangible thing. It's something that we make up in order to regulate our behavior towards others.
I wouldn't say makeup. The concept of rights is very, very scientific. I've read John Locke's theory of rights. I think there's aspects in which I disagree with, but the gist of what he's saying, it's very, very scientific. It's very ingrained in fact.
So I guess maybe made up isn't the right word. Conceptualize. Yeah. We conceptualize it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so you're saying that the mother has no obligation. Okay, I'm going in a different direction here. You're saying you're saying that there's a difference between a human and a human being.
Yeah, if you wanted to be technical, because you try to get me on the gotcha moment when I said, "Do you believe in human rights?" and I was like, "Yes," and I was like, "Well, the unborn human, so therefore, so I had to start being technical." I usually don't become technical until my opponents become technical.
Right. So, well, I think technicality is important, especially if you're talking about laws.
Yeah, this is TikTok debate. So most people are not trying to say most people are not technical, but if you want to be technical, we can be very, very clear cut and concise.
Yeah. I think if you're, that's a whole different conversation. I appreciate that you are technical. I think it's rare to have a conversation like that. But kind of back on topic, I would say, I'm interested to know what is the difference between a human and a human being, and are you saying independency?
So I wouldn't utilize the word independency, because that provides the alternative of dependency, and my argument isn't about it being dependable on something else. I think anybody who argues that is very fallacious, and that could lead to a bunch of different rabbit holes. But by human, I'm particularly referring to being of the human species. So I'm just making a very scientific term. And then by human being, I'm referring to like kind of the more social and political atmosphere. So like when I interact with you, I'm not interacting with like of the human species, because sperm would be of the human species. I'm not interacting with a sperm. I'm interacting with a human being. So this means like a full kind of independent functioning human beings, which you can like physically interact with or intellectually interact with, like the way that we are right now. So that's the difference between human and human being.
Okay, so you're saying the definition, the human being is contingent on a political institution? Am I saying that wrong?
I wouldn't say it's contingent on the political institution. I'm just saying it's the reason why I'm defining that is within the context of a political institution, only in reference to abortion, because we are talking about the illegal or legal status of abortion. But if we were just talking about human beings detached from abortion or like any laws, then I could just essentially say a human being is just that which is independent of something else, and like I can interact with. That could still be dragged into like, okay, you can interact with sperm, but like that's just kind of the way I'm referring to it. But I don't think the terms that I'm utilizing like at all play a factor. It's just like what I'm referring to. Because like even though I can't properly define it, it doesn't change that I'm referring to X and then this is Y.
Okay, well I guess I'll say what I believe and you tell me where the error is. So I think when you're talking about sperm and I can't think the name of the female version, but that's not life. It's not human because I'm sorry. It might be life. I'm not sure the exact definition when you come to that. I mean, it does self-sustain, I guess, if you want to make that a definition of life. But I think when we're talking about human beings and human rights, you have to define something as a human. So a sperm isn't human because it only has half the DNA. Something becomes human when it has human DNA and is capable of self-sustaining and growing and reproducing itself. So to me, if something has human rights, then if you're a human, you automatically have human rights because you are a human. And to me, your humanity begins in the womb.
That's real. I mean, cool. Especially in the legal atmosphere, I think that's up to legal philosophers to really define that outside of the scientific atmosphere. I don't really play definition games because again, whether or not that you disagree or agree or I can't even properly define something doesn't at all change the fact of what I'm referring to. And I could still outline exactly what I'm talking about without giving